craft work is a necessary expression of her creativity. I'm delighted to welcome Janice Johnston to speak about the art of memory.
Thank you. Oh, you know what? I'm going to try. I actually am going to try and project. Can you guys hear me well? Okay, because then it keeps my hands from having to use the microphone. Well, as she said, I am a Milner, and I have been here for now 30 years in the Washington, D.C. area, coming from the San Francisco Bay Area. I have always been creative. I grew up sewing my own clothes, and I did lampshades for a while, and t-shirts and jewelry and all kinds of craft work. But as she said, you know, it was time for me to do something different. This is my genesis. This is where I started. When I had my first child, I said I hadn't picked up a crochet hook since I was 12, and I was in my late 30s when I had my first one. And I said, I'm just going to see if I can't make a hat out of yarn. I had never made a hat before, ever in my life. So I did it. I made hats for her, and I got hooked on it, so to speak. And I decided to make some more. And I made some more, and then people started, wow, these are great. Do you sell these? I'm like, no. They said, oh, you should. So then it was a total addiction. We all know, as you're sitting there knitting, it's a total addiction, but it's also a meditation. So for years, I sold at some smaller craft shows this product. And when I turned 50, I said, it's time for me to do something different. What's my Julia Child moment? Julia Child was 50 by the time she published her first cookbook. I'm like, if she can do that at 50 and reinvent herself, what can I do? And one morning I opened up the newspaper, and there was an article about the woman who makes hats for the arena stage. It was a full-page article. It was actually several pages in the style section. And it just hit me like a lightning bolt. And I brought the article down to my husband, and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to learn how to make a proper hat, like really like old craft millinery. So he said, great, that's, you know, I support it, do what you need to do. So that's what I did. I pursued how to learn how to make a hat, which you can't, short of going up to New York and enrolling in, you know, the Fashion Institute of Technology, or, you know, Parsons, or going to Chicago and taking classes, there are not a lot of opportunities to learn millinery. Now, millinery comes from the word Milan, because back in the 1700s, when hats became in fashion, because the Catholic Church said that women should be covering their heads, the best hats came out of Milan. So milliners were from Milan. The best hat makers came from Milan. So that's where the word millinery comes from. So I did some research, and I discovered that Penland School of Crafts had a class later that year, and I had just the amount of time to apply. They don't offer that class very often, so it was sort of like I was in the right place at the right time. Has anybody here been to Penland, taken classes at Penland? It's awesome.
I haven't taken a class, I just went to visit.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I took classes. It's a 2-week class where you're there for 2 weeks, and all you do is eat, sleep, and create. And the class that I was in was taught by Wayne Wickern, who is one of the few male milliners in this country. It is female dominated by far. When we've had other classes or gatherings in the country, he tends to be the only male in the group. So he taught us how to use all the tricks of blocking hats, straws, and felts. And here's me. And these are some of the work that I did. And these are some of the blocks. These do not belong to me. Those are fancy, expensive blocks. Those are, I think, probably some of Wayne's blocks. So the art of millinery, there's a couple of ways of doing it, and I'll show you as we go along. But what I learned at Penland was the art of blocking felts and wools. So this is a felt hat and straw hats. This is a crown block. You block on you block your felts on a wood block. You pick your crown, you pick your brim, you tape them together, and you use these millinery forms. These are commercial millinery forms that, unless you're going to make your own felts, does anybody here felt? Okay, unless you make your own felts, you purchase these pre-made felts. And these are made out of wool. They also come in fur felts, which are made out of rabbit furs and different kinds of animal furs, which are really, really soft and much more pliable. The wool is a little harder to use. And then these are the straw felts, the straw forms. This is called a hood, and this is called a cape line. This particular cape line has already been stiffened, because you have to stiffen it with like a gelatin in order to make the hat not floppy. So this one is not as stiff as some of my others, but it does have a stiffener on it to keep it from collapsing. So once you need to steam the hell out of these things. You've got to literally put them in a steamer and put lots of water and steam on them to get them all pliable. Once you've gotten them all pliable, you stretch them over your wood block really tight, and it takes a lot of energy, a lot of effort to pull it down, get all the bubbles out, make it all nice and smooth. Then you use these ropes, these millinery ropes, and looks like this. And you pull it tight and tight and tight, and it just tightens it up so that it's nice and taut. And then you let it dry. And once it's dried, you peel it off, and you finish it off with wires and all kinds of lovely ribbons. But that's basically, you know, whether you're doing a straw or a felt, that's the process for blocking a hat. Here. So that's a collection of different straws. You can see they come in all great colors. And those are the felts, the wool felts. And that's an example of when it comes off the block on the bottom there, you'd have to trim it up, and it sort of looks sort of raw like that. And you need to sew the ends. I also took a class at Aramont. Has anybody been to Aramont in Gatlinburg, Tennessee? Yeah, you get around. So every 2 years, the millinery community in the United States actually comes together for what used to be called Hat Camp. It is now called the Millinery Meetup. And it's about 100 milliners from around the country, and they bring in amazing milliners from around the world to teach classes. So I was really, really fortunate because I was able to take a class from the woman who, in the upper left there, she makes hats for Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries. She's from Australia. So I was thrilled to be able to take a class from her because I love that. As you can see, I'm really inspired by the whole 1920s sort of Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries, Downton Abbey. To be able to take a class from her was just thrilling. And the purple hat is the hat that, the technique that she showed us how to use. And then I also took a class from the woman in the bottom there. She makes, she teaches at Duquesne University in Chicago, and she teaches a lot of costume millinery for the theater, which I'm very interested in as well. So these are just some of the felt hats that I've made. Different blocks make different styles. Some are a little bolder than others because everybody has a different personal style. So some I make really crazy ostentatious, and some are very, very simple because the market is, you know, it's a very individual taste. This particular hat is a hand constructed straw. It's not blocked on a block. It literally, I pinched it and created it by hand. It's all sort of organic in the way it came together. And then I also do fabric hats because they're less expensive to create and there's more variety. There's more option for variety with the fabric that you choose. So this particular hat is made with crushed velvet, and because of the weight that you need, and so it's not floppy, I use a upholstery weight fabric for most of my hats because it already has sort of a heft to it. So you know, they're fully lined. I'll put this on. So needless to say, my market is the fall and the winter for these hats. So, you know, the bows are really popular. I also make sort of little cloche caps. The brimmed hat is a much more universal. This may not fit me. There, it does. This hat is much more universal, looks great on almost everybody who puts it on. Probably my top seller is that design. So here's some other ones that I've made. That flower I made out of some beautiful silk ribbon that I got in Paris when I went to, and I found this amazing shop in Paris that sells nothing but millinery materials, and they had the most beautiful ribbons. And this one I did custom for one of my colleagues who was going to a wedding, and she brought her dress in. I said, I think I have fabric that matches it perfectly, and it matched it absolutely perfectly. So I made a hat just so she could take it to Scotland for this wedding she went to. So I do some spring, not a lot. It's not as big of a market as my fall and my winter market. That hat, the buttons are made out of tops of champagne corks that I got when I was in Europe. Another cloche. And then the final type of hat that I make is I do some upcycled wool hats. These are all made out of old sweaters. Everybody at some point has ruined a sweater, a wool sweater, accidentally thrown it in the washing machine and it comes out, it was this big and it comes out this big. That's felting. So you all probably have felted and you just don't know it. So what it does is it takes the fiber. If you were to cut into your sweater, it would ravel without shrinking it down. But once you shrink it down, it takes all the fibers and it condenses them. And it allows you to be able to cut them without it raveling. And it creates an actual piece of fabric. So I take the old sweaters, I go to the thrift store, I'm the one going down the aisle going, wool, you know, I'm looking for wool or cashmere. I make cashmere scarves as well. So I just sort of find what I think is going to be the softest, most attractive, not pilly sweater that I can make these wool caps out of. Here, I'll put this one on so you can see this one. So that's this one. So yeah, these are all, and I do lamb's wool usually, because that really, when you wash it, it really softens up. The cashmere is a little too soft, so I use those for my scarves, because that feels so nice right around your neck, but they tend to be a little too floppy for a hat. So you need something that's got a little bit of body to it. And that's it. So, do we have any questions about millinery or what I do, or? Yes?
Are they different sizes?
I do, actually. One of the things that I pride myself in is that I make hats for the hard-to-fit head. So many women come into my booths when I'm doing shows, and they'll say, "I bet you don't have something for me," and I'm like, "I bet I do," and they'll walk out with a hat, like so excited that they actually got a hat that fit their head, because the commercial size in the stores is about a 21.5, 22. So if you notice, if you have a larger head and you go to the department store, they just don't fit. But I tend to make a 23, and then what I do is there is a adjustable ribbon. I only do this in my felt hats and my straw hats. There's an adjustable ribbon on the inside, so that if it is a little too big, you just tighten it up, and it can fit better on your head.
What does 22 or 23 mean as compared to a men's?
Centimeters?
No, inches. So yeah, when you, so I often will measure someone's head when they come into my booth if they don't know what size hat that they would like to try on. And you start measuring from back here up to the front. You stick 2 fingers in so that there's a little wiggle room. You don't want it too tight. A man's head is generally on the 24, 25, if not bigger.
All right, but like 6 7/8 or something.
That there is a scale that you can measure the two between. Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Right. So, but these are all small, medium, and large. So if it's sort of a lot of them are one of a kind. Some of them I can reproduce. I tend not to like to, because as you all probably do, doing the same thing over and over and over again takes the joy out of it and the creativity out of it. But the ones that are popular like this, I tend to do multiples of. So, any other questions? Yes?
The decorations that you're using on it, is that the antique buttons?
Some of them are antique, some of them are just commercial buttons, and then I do a combination. It depends on what I can find. Yeah.
I've got a whole collection if you need some.
Oh, we'll have to talk.
I used to use them also for my handbags, but I'm kind of not using them anymore. So just, if you need any, then
Oh.
give me a call.
I'd love to, yeah.
Good.
So one of the things about the hat blocks, back in the day, the hat makers, because it used to be a huge industry, mostly I would say the larger cities had the big hat making companies. The designers would make these hat blocks, and at the end of the year, they would have a new style for the next year, just like any fashion designer. So they would, a lot of them were literally burned, because they didn't want their competitors to get a hold of them, or they just didn't have room for them, because they are kind of bulky. So getting hat blocks is a bit of a challenge. There aren't that many hat block makers. There's some in Australia, there's some in Britain, there's a couple in the United States, and then you can buy on eBay some older ones, but then sometimes it's questionable the condition that they're in, because they have been pinned and taped, and wood does break down after many years of use. So it's there's some people who hoard them. Like, really, you need 500 of them? And then there's people like myself who I think I might have 15 total. But generally, if you're serious about this industry, you've got multiple blocks for different head sizes, different brim sizes. I have some that have large brims and small brims, and you know, this one has a little crease in the middle. So there's only so much variety you can do with the blocks that you have, but you can mix and match. Like I said, you pick your crown, you pick your brim, you can mix and match. So you can put this on a tiny crown, or you can put a tiny brim, or you can put it on a large brim. It just depends on what you're looking for and what your customer is looking for. So anything else? Yes?
How many hats do you start the season with?
Well, it really depends.
What's your goal?
Well, it depends on how many shows I do. Generally, I don't do a lot because I work full time. I've got 2 kids. I'm busy. I think at this point I have about 50, if not more, probably. And I'm doing a few shows this summer, this winter. I do a couple of trunk shows at people's stores, which is great because it brings people into their store, and I get to hang out, in a cute boutique for a day, buy things. So, yes.
When you're storing them, do you stuff them with tissue or something?
I do.
To keep the shape?
I do. Yeah. And I cover the nicer ones. I cover with plastic, so that they don't get cat hair on them and stuff like that. Yes.
Are you buying exotic materials like feathers and?
I do. I buy some feathers and buttons and appliques. I go up to New York. I try to go up at least once a year and go into the garment district. Thank you, the garment district. And I stock up on all those good things. But as we all know, anybody here sew around here? There are no fabric stores around here.
Yeah.
So it's very much a challenge to find quality fabric for the work that I do. So I've been fortunate enough to be able to go to Portland on business and for family, and there's some great fabric stores out there, but it's a challenge.
How do you store the wool hats, without putting it into those, these
Mothballs?
yeah.
I haven't had any problems with the moths with those. Yeah. So, and the mothballs would make it smell yucky.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was
No.
wondering.
No. So, is that it?
Do you have any samples of your store?
I didn't bring any today. No, I was really going to talk specifically about millinery, but I'll have them at the show over at Thanksgiving. So, anything else? It's been my pleasure.
Thank you, Janet.
You're welcome.
Sarah.